Hello again. We are just about ready to begin. And so before we start, I wanted to share a few housekeeping tips. There you go. For some of you who might be new to Adobe Connect. So everyone with the exception of our presenters has been muted. And so we ask that you please use the chat pod on the left side of your screen if you have any questions or you'd like to share resources. We're pleased to offer live captioning for our event today, and you'll find the caption pod at the bottom of your screen. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we will notify you as soon as it's available on our NCASE website. And at the end of the webinar, we'll launch an evaluation, and we ask if you would please take a moment to give us your feedback. We really do value that. And last but not least, the PowerPoint for today's presentation is available for download in the Files pod on the left side below the chat pod. If you're having trouble downloading it, please don't worry. We'll be sure to email it to everyone after today's presentation. And so at this point, I'm very pleased to turn the reins over to my NCASE colleague, Susan O'Connor.
Good afternoon. This is Susan O'Connor, and on behalf of the National Center on Afterschool and Summer Enrichment, I am so happy to welcome you to the second of two webinars. We are sharing today what we learned from a peer learning group series on social emotional learning. We were joined in that process by 10 states who participated over the winter and spring of this past year in an effort to explore how to strengthen social emotional climates in out of school time. We have a great session planned, and as you join, I'm just going to encourage you to enter into the chat pod your name, your role, and where you're from. It gives us a great chance to see who's here. Love seeing so far who's joined us. We have people here from Vermont and Colorado, Pennsylvania, New York, Kansas. So it's so helpful for everybody to see who's joining and where they're from. So we have a great session planned today, and we're being joined by three deeply experienced colleagues who have some great things to share. I want to welcome them to our session first and introduce you to them briefly, and I'll introduce each of them again as they begin to talk. We have Priscilla Little from the Forum for Youth Investment, Holly Morehouse from the State After School Network for Vermont, and Linda Bradford from Oklahoma Child Care Services. Now we really want to get a sense of who you are, and I want you to indicate on this poll what type of organization you represent. And this gives us a really good chance to understand who our audience is today, so that we're sure to take that into account as we go through our remarks. Just choose one. So far, we have quite a few people from 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and that's wonderful. We love to see this, and welcome. And from State Child Care Development Fund lead agencies. And then we have some others from state education departments who are technical assistance providers, who are program providers, state agency licensing staff. I'm going to give it another minute for people to vote here so that we have a complete sense of who's on. Okay, Preeti, I think we can go back to the regular screen. Thank you for letting us know. It really helps us to customize what we talk about a little bit. So what is on our agenda for today? Well, we're going to start with an overview of a recently published brief that captures what was really learned by the 10 state teams I mentioned before that participated in the peer learning group. You will see that we have the link for it down right under the chat in the file share so that you can download this brief and read it. It's also in the NCASE resource library. And once we finish going over that brief, we're going to hear from Priscilla Little about the groundbreaking work of the Aspen Institute's National Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development, followed by Holly Morehouse from Vermont with some great social emotional learning supports that state is providing to programs in Vermont, which really kind of brings to life some of the concepts that Priscilla will have shared with us. And then Linda Bradford is going to share out about Oklahoma support specifically on behavioral and mental health consultation. And in between all of this information, we'll share with you some relevant resources, and we also will want to take some time to hear from you about what your state, your territory, your tribe is doing to advance social emotional outcomes. We have quite a large number of participants today, and so we're really not able to unmute you for the discussion. Instead, we have people share their thoughts, typing them into what we call a chat pod. You'll see how that works in a minute. And this really gives us a chance to hear from everyone, and the really wonderful thing about that is that we save what is shared in those chat pods so that you can have a record of that along with the PowerPoint itself. So here's a picture of the social emotional learning brief that captures what we learned from the peer learning group. As I said, the group included 10 cross-sector state teams, and I want to just say briefly that the teams included representatives. They might have had 4 members, some of them had 8 or 9 members, and there were representatives from Child Care Development Fund agencies, from Department of Ed, from 21st Century Community Learning Centers, from state after-school networks. It included training and TA professionals, child care resource and referral centers, and program reps. And this is the kind of stakeholder group that is really great for us to pull together if we're trying to make big changes in the fields. We know then that we're hearing the voices from everyone. So I think that the states, one of their top takeaways was that forming those stakeholder groups was incredibly helpful. The peer learning group explored a range of issues, including the connection of social emotional learning to development. We talked about adverse childhood experiences, trauma-informed and healing-centered practice. And these topics were covered in our first webinar from September 26th, which has been recorded and is available. And today's webinar will cover the other topics that is included in this brief, primarily strengthening staff capacity to build social emotional competencies, and mental health consultation. And the brief includes lovely state examples from Vermont and Oklahoma, which you'll be hearing more about today. Building staff capacity. This is one of the biggest and most important challenges for all state system planners, for program directors. Yesterday, a small group of the peer learning group states gathered for a discussion about the overlap between quality and social emotional learning. And I asked them, well, how much of quality do you think is tied into the way relationships happen in our programs and the kind of social emotional learning that is happening? and they said it's the absolute core of quality, and they estimate that it's 75% or more of the quality picture. So much of the ability to do this really depends on building the capacity that staff have in building social-emotional competencies for youth. We can accomplish this through building positive relationships, providing children with a safe space to explore new interests, and building skills like communication, decision-making, and problem-solving. And we've cited here, and you'll see this in the resources list, a staff self-assessment tool that I find to be very helpful, developed by Yoder and Devaney in 2015. And it's a way, if you're running programs, of having your staff be able to tell you what it is they feel confident about and what it is they still need supports on. This year, the Aspen Institute report on social, emotional, and academic development was released, and we're really fortunate today to have Priscilla Little join us. She's actually taking some time out from a conference that she's at to share with us what she learned from her experience in working on this very important report. She's a senior consultant with the Forum for Youth Investment, where she spent 2 years supporting partner engagement for the National Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development. And she worked with youth development organizations to really ensure that recommendations that are coming out of the Commission recognize the invaluable role that after-school programs play and how all systems and all settings can work together to support the whole child. So, Priscilla, I turn things over to you.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be on this webinar this afternoon. And the one thing I forgot to ask Susan to mention is that I've had really the privilege of being part of NCASE as a member of the technical working group for the past, gosh, I guess it's 3 years. So it's been really fun to see this effort grow and to meet some of you who are on the phone today. The National Commission for Social, Emotional, and Academic Development, and I'm not going to say that phrase again, from here on in, it's the Commission, was launched in 2016 with the goal of being the spark that could turn 3 factors: the growing science about how learning happens, the broad demand for this approach among families, educators, and employers, and the new policy opportunities into a true movement. As you'll see, the Commission was initially envisioned to be a 25-member board consisting of leaders in education, youth development, research, policy, business, health, and the military. The family grew to be over 200 partners. We soon realized that in order to dig deeply into the work, dedicated engagement of educators, researchers, parents, and youth was going to be essential. So in addition to the 25-member core of the commissioners, it built out the Council of Distinguished Scientists, the Council of Distinguished Educators, the Aspen Youth Commission, the Parent Advisory Panel, and a large and robust funders collaborative. Late in the life of the Commission, 2 new groups were formed to address some key missing links in supporting social, emotional, and academic development: a commitment to equity and the role that youth development organizations play in supporting social, emotional learning in and out of school buildings. Dozens of resources were created over the course of the 2 years: case studies, videos, research policy, and practice statements, and these are the 4 final reports. The main report, which folded in all the work across the subcommittees, is From a Nation at Risk to a Nation at Hope. The practice recommendations primarily focus on helping districts and schools, as well as youth-serving and community organizations, work with families and communities to support students' social, emotional, and academic development. They are supported by a policy framework that will help states support and drive change at the district and school levels in 3 core areas: building adult capacity, learning environments, and resources. And the work moving forward can be guided by a research agenda for the next generation that helps close the gap between what is known about the interconnectedness of social, emotional, and academic learning and what is typically done in schools. The final report contains 6 main recommendations. Set a clear vision that broadens the definition of student success to prioritize the whole child, and this includes aligning action plans, budgets, adult workforce development, and using measures across school and out of school time to support continuous improvement. The second recommendation is to really transform learning settings so they are safe and supportive for all young people, bringing assets of the community organizations into the life of the school. The Commission also recognized we really need to change instruction to teach social, emotional, and cognitive skills, but also embed those skills into the academics and school-wide practices so that practice becomes equally important as curriculum. Building adult expertise in child development, align resources and leverage partners in the community to address the whole child. For example, fund a dedicated position in school and districts to intentionally engage partners. Provide access to quality summer and after school for all. Use data to identify and address gaps in students' access to a full range of learning opportunities in and out of school. And finally, forge closer connections between research and practice, developing robust data sharing agreements between schools and other youth-serving agencies to collaboratively address strengths and challenges. Central to the recommendations of the final reports were a set of graphics that helped to depict the Commission's work and thinking. I will just share one that we created so that we can talk about the research base. This graphic summarizes how SEL or SEED can be explained and acknowledges the broader skills and competencies, attitudes, beliefs, mindsets, and values. You have likely seen a version of this graphic. It is not unlike the CASEL competencies that were shared on the last webinar. But early on, the Commission made a decision to be inclusive of all the voices and perspectives. It would not adopt an existing framework, but instead develop one that took all the good research that had come before and incorporated it into a new graphic. Though they are interrelated, skills and competencies can be organized into three areas: cognitive skills and competencies that underline the ability to focus and pay attention, emotional skills and competencies to help children and youth recognize and manage their emotions, understand them, take perspective, and social and interpersonal skills and competencies that enable children and youth to read social cues and navigate social situations, do teamwork, be effective communicators. Importantly, this set of skills and competencies develop and are used in dynamic interaction with attitudes and values, which are shown in the second ring of the figure. So by attitudes, beliefs, and mindsets, we include children and youth's attitudes and beliefs about themselves, others, and their own circumstances. Examples would include self-concept and identity, agency, and self-efficacy. Character and values represent ways of thinking and habits that support children and youth to work together as friends, family, and community, and encompasses understanding, caring about, and acting on core ethical values such as integrity, honesty, and compassion. It was the belief of the Commission and the belief of many of all researchers that when learning environments recognize these skills as mutually reinforcing and central to learning, children are better able to master academic content and knowledge. We also know that these skills and competencies grow over time and can be explicitly taught and modeled. When children and youth possess a full array of social, emotional, cognitive, and academic skills, they are best equipped to prosper in the classroom, perform in the workplace, and succeed in life as contributing and productive members of society. As the Commission ended in the winter of 2018, the Science of Learning and Development Initiative was emerging to be one of the many organizations that is carrying forward the work of the Commission. This diagram, developed by Fold, is based on everything we know about the skills and competencies needed for success and the brain science behind that knowledge. It illustrates the conditions for optimal and equitable learning environments that foster the skills and competencies that the Commission and others believed are so important for healthy social, emotional, and academic development. If you look at the center of it, it places the onus not on the young person to develop a set of skills and competencies, but on the adults who work in those settings to support the whole child. And of course, anyone working in after school can see themselves in these 5 elements. Starting with strong relationships and environments filled with safety and belonging, we offer young people opportunities to develop critical skills through rich experiences and individualized supports. This diagram has been useful in helping address a fundamental question for our field. How can we apply what we know about how children learn to improve the capacity of adults across learning settings to be effective in creating each of these 5 conditions for learning? And how do we ensure that all young people get access to those adults? Again, based on brain science, SOLD has helped us identify the key features of these environments. So going beyond the 5 blue constructs to really think about what are the key elements that research says, based on what we know about how a young person's brain developed, are critical for optimal learning and development. And so starting again with strong relationships, we see that an environment needs trust and respect and continuity in experiences. Environments filled with safety and belonging require caring and culturally responsive communities, a consistency in practices, and a predictability in routines. Rich instructional experiences need to offer meaningful work and use inquiry as a major learning strategy. They need to be well-designed and collaborative, provide ongoing feedback to young people, and provide opportunities to reflect on the development of one's own thought processes. Individualized supports need ongoing assessments to identify barriers and strengths and to help access to integrated services. And finally, intentional development of critical skills, mindsets, and habits requires explicit instruction in social and emotional and cognitive skills, as well as an infusion of opportunities to use social and emotional skills in everyday practice. They also require approaches to group management that enable children to develop responsibility. But what we also learned is that while the science tells us these practices matter, programs operate in systems that have their own institutional realities that don't often align with research. Different systems have different restrictions or opportunities based on their history, community expectations, and regulatory demands, and I'm sure everyone on the phone can resonate with that statement. If you just think about the juvenile justice settings or after-school settings or K-12, they all have their own set of experiences. Expectations and restrictions are imposed not only by the official policy and statutes and regulations and administrative directives, but some of the many more informal practices that exist in many of our after-school programs. And what we've often seen is that systems and settings fall into one or more readiness traps when they use age as a proxy for stage, assigning a person to a program based on age, not stage of development. Time as a proxy for progress, when we assume that since a person has been doing something for a long time, they must be making progress. Completion as a proxy for competence. I have a diploma, so I must be ready for college and career. And access as a proxy for quality. Resources and staff may exist, but are they deployed properly? And are those staff equipped to work with young people effectively? In the context of after-school programming, institutional realities might include low pay, high staff turnover, large group sizes with a high youth worker-youth ratio, poor facilities, lack of adequate space. I'm sure you know all these realities. And I'm guessing that many of you are nodding right now. Just to put everything together before we move to chat pods, I just want to reiterate 4 statements that I've been working on. Integrating social, emotional, and academic development is critical to the development of the whole child. Adult capacity in learning settings is critical to youth success. Good developmental practice can create optimal conditions for youth success, but organizational practices can incentivize or prohibit developmental practice, and often unintentionally. And now these are our 3 discussion questions, and I'm going to turn it back to Susan.
So when we move to chat pods, we'll be asking you to respond about 3 different things. What program level practices are you doing in your region or state or program to set the environment and support that adult capacity Priscilla talked about to create optimal conditions for learning? What system level practices are in place? And thirdly, how are your organizational policies and procedures promoting or inhibiting good developmental practice? With that said, Preeti is going to pop up for us the chat pods, and please, we encourage you to enter your ideas into all 3 of these if you have time, or if you want to add a number of ideas in one and have less to say in the other 2 pods, that's fine as well. but Priscilla will be tracking what goes up and pointing out some helpful resources and ideas. Okay, we have a couple of ideas that have come up. One from Erin. We need training resources. And Katie saying training such as this shared with our staff. Mentoring the staff to show up to students with severe behavior issues. And down below in developmental practices, Aaron's saying as far as organizational policies, we need buy-in from the home school to coordinate services. And that's such an important role that we play in youth development programs is we're often that bridge between home and school and trying to keep those environments using a consistent approach is so important. Rachel's mentioning that they use school psychologists and social workers to provide SEL, and we found that during our peer learning group that after-school programs often rely on resources, mental health resources that are available in schools. In a sense, it becomes our default mental health support, especially when it's hard to access community mental health supports. Priscilla is asking people what kind of curriculum and tools you're using. So it'd be great for people to add in here. Adrian already said paths. But if people are using other curriculum that they like and feel that work, that would be great to hear. Again, Priscilla's asking us another question. How do we support volunteers to work with middle and high school students? How can we help them understand that developmental age? Okay, I'm going to give people 1 more minute to enter their ideas. This has been very helpful. I see Clint saying second step. Strong teens coming from Kathy. people are saying down in the organizational issues, we just have a lack of time for enough training for staff. Constant struggle with our part-time workforce. Okay, I'll just wait for one more idea to pop up, and then we're going to go back to our presentation. And thanks everybody for those ideas. That information gives us a sense of where you're at, what resources you have access to. Very helpful input for us. So there are two general ways that states can build staff capacity, which is something that Priscilla focused on a lot in her talk about the commission. The first is through policies and systems, as you see up here on this graphic. Things that will help set the vision and help communicate about the importance of social-emotional learning, standards, competencies, training and TA systems, aligned resources, and partnerships. And then the second thing is through direct practice on building staff capacity, on the use of curriculum and targeted and evidence-based activities, and work around reducing suspension and expulsion. So today we're really fortunate to hear about the way that Vermont has worked over time on building staff capacity on social-emotional learning and how that emerged both in the way they supported program practice, but also in the way they did funding and obtained some legislation that's related to the work. So I want to introduce to you Holly Morehouse, who's going to share this Vermont progress. And she has 20 years of experience working on positive youth development, on community-based decision-making and collaboration in her role as Executive Director of Vermont Afterschool. She has a doctorate from Clark University, and her research and publications include work on after-school programs, on school culture change. She's developed a spatial map of indicators on risk and vulnerability. And Holly, we really look forward to hearing your details about Vermont's approach to SEL, and I turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. It's exciting to be on this webinar. It's really exciting to see the number of people from so many different states. I'm glad to have you all here, and a special shout out to those Vermonters I saw popping up. Great to have you on too. It's also, I'm happy to follow Priscilla because so much of what she said in those 6 recommendations you'll see woven throughout the lessons we learned and the systems that we've been trying to build over the last several years here in Vermont. This first slide gives you sort of an overview and a timeline of some of the development that we've gone through with this project. I want to point out that the initiative and the impetus for the project really came from the field. We were hearing, as a statewide professional development and policy organization, we were hearing over and over again that what after-school programs and summer learning programs really wanted was support around challenging behaviors, difficult behaviors, tough conversations with parents, like all that kind of stuff. And we'd been offering what we could, and we finally got to the point where it felt like we can't do this Band-Aid approach. And everyone on staff here at Vermont Afterschool, is an expert in youth development, but we really felt to really move forward and move the field forward, we needed to go to another level in this work. And we're able, with an initial grant, to bring on staff, a full-time certified social worker, to really open up and build out our staff. And I think it connects to what Priscilla was saying about making social and emotional learning a part of everything. It's embedded in everything we do. So embedded here within Vermont After School and embedded within after-school programs across the state, and how do we do that? the second, and also the fact that that professional expertise. When do you call that in, and how do you best use that? A second thing I want to note when you look across these bullets here is that the support for the project has been cross-agency. I mean, it started with our Child Development Division with the Department for Children and Families with the initial pilot. As it grew, the Agency of Education in Vermont stepped in and added on some other components about one-to-one coaching and evening trainings and family events. And now we see the Vermont Department of Health stepping in. Really, they're seeing the social determinants of health, the ACEs work, the youth feeling a sense of belonging, really tying to the social emotional learning, and also private foundations, including a local bank foundation that has taken on the project for last year and currently this year in a really big way around youth resiliency. At the same time as, we sort of, you see in that slide where we moved from purchasing a curriculum and really trying to implement a curriculum in after school to a number of different strategies for supporting the field. And as that growth was happening, we also had sort of this parallel track of policy and how do we infuse the after-school field into all the conversations that were happening in our state around adverse childhood experiences, trauma-informed practices, the opioid epidemic. All those conversations were happening, and after school wasn't, at the beginning, always in those. So we had to do quite a bit of work, and you all will know this, but the things that kind of worked was emphasizing the connection between school and family and that important role that after school plays, often being sort of the front line that's that's talking to the family members when they're coming, or the grandmother who's coming to pick up the child because the mother is not able to, or the father's not able to, or whatever reason. So actually being in those moments, those tough moments with families, and also serving as that connection. We also talk a lot with decision makers about after school being that perfect setting for social emotional learning, and so it's that crisis response, but it's also those places where kids are in multi-age groups and interacting, and you can experience all that growth and expansion and really infuse things throughout your program. So some of the successes we saw is, for the first time ever, Vermont last year allocated state funding to increase access to after-school and summer learning. That was from tobacco settlement funds that was coming through. We also saw after-school increasing access to after-school and summer learning as a top priority in Vermont's opioid recommendations from our Opioid Coordination Council. It also showed up in the Marijuana Commission report. And like I said in the previous slide, you see multiple places where state agencies have stepped up to support after school through the SEL and trauma-informed work that we're doing. Going back to sort of, where we started, we did start with a curriculum, and the comments and lessons learned I have on that are nothing against the curriculum that we chose, that we were working with. It's a wonderful, wonderful curriculum. But there were two sort of major lessons, that we found, and one is captured in that last bullet. Is as we were implementing curriculum, there was something about the setting that in after school where, you're moving and you're shaking and you're snacking, you're out at recess and you're back in for learning and all these kind of things that having set aside lessons where now we're going to learn about social emotional learning, it didn't fit with the flow of our programs. And we really saw a desire in the field to not just have, we're going to do 15 minutes of SEL today, but really to focus on how do we set up our settings, our programs, how do we change the flow of the day, how do we do all these things that support positive SEL. The other thing that we found was really staff, right? So coming from a field where we have all kinds of wonderful people in after school who are coming with all kinds of different backgrounds, and some with a lot of training and some with not so much, and all of a sudden they're dealing with brain science, right, and emotions and all this kind of stuff. And we found that we really needed to take a step back and do a lot of work across our state on building that in-depth buy-in and depth of understanding around SEL first with the field before we could come in and say, well, now use this curriculum. We had to get to the why with staff, right? Because remember what I said at the beginning, like the thing that was coming to us is not, I want to learn more about social emotional learning or how the brain works. What was coming to me was like, to us was, we're struggling with behaviors. We don't know this kid's driving us crazy, or we can't get to the learning because the group is wild or whatever. So we need to sort of switch that and change the groundwork behind that. Where we are today with our trauma-informed and resilience efforts, we have done a number of family outreach events, once again making that connection between school day, after school, and family. We did sort of blanket the state with lots and lots of basic SEL training on this is the way your brain works, and here are the parts of the brain, and here's what happens, and couching it both and not as just this is just the way that a child's brain works or a teenager's brain works, but also us as adults, right? Because SEL, we've also found, has this multi-layers of, as human beings, we are still growing and learning in this area. And if you've worked an entire day at school and now you're in after school and you're tired and you're exhausted, you may be more likely to flip your lid. And so how do you also build your own resiliency as a staff person so that then how you interact with the children and the youth is positive in the way you want it to be. So we switched. We started with those baseline trainings, and then we quickly moved into communities of practice. So these are groups, there are 38 groups meeting the programs last year that were meeting once or twice per month for 2 hours a session. These were leadership level staff in trying to get at sustainability. We were going in an earlier iteration and doing some one-on-one coaching with staff in the moment in the program, and it seemed so awesome. But one of the things that we discovered was sometimes the site leaders would kind of back away from owning the SEL components or the challenging behaviors or that, because it was like, oh, well, Vermont After School is going to come in and they're going to do that coaching, so I'm not going to deal with that yet. So we wanted to sort of flip that and really focus on the leaders. So these communities practice are site coordinators and directors from across multiple sites meeting regularly with deep discussion about social emotional learning, and then having time in every meeting to share challenges with one another, hear each other, listen carefully, offer cross solutions. Some of the programs that have been doing it, they're now in their third year, have added in special components. So they do SEL once a month, and then they meet a second time, and they've added things like restorative justice practices. So they're really deepening the level of practice across their entire system. Another big characteristic of our work is, and Susan mentioned this around stakeholder groups, building stakeholder groups for after-school providers in their local communities so that it is not after school all by themselves, but who are the mental health providers, the community justice centers, the social service agencies who can operate in that space in those communities and help support this work and really build out those partnerships. I didn't include it in the slide, but one of the most surprising partnerships, I wouldn't have thought of it ahead of time, but is with our foster care system. And I think when you think about it, there's this synergy with foster care parents and after-school providers who are both receiving children often or sometimes coming from trauma, having these experiences, and the parents and the staff not always having the level of training behind that to know how to deal with that. And being able to work together in that. So we've done, in one community we did a 10-week training. It was in the evening. We provided childcare, and foster parents and after-school staff came together and did this training together. And now one of our biggest pieces right now is the Youth Resiliency Leadership Institute. This was to really help leaders in our system build that leadership. It was 36 hours of training, full-day trainings for 6 months long, and we're proud this year to award 14 micro-credentials and youth resilience coming out of that, and we've built this whole nother layer of leadership across our state. And I think with that, Susan, did you want to open for questions?
I do. We have time for a couple of questions, and it was wonderful to hear from Holly. I particularly love the Leadership Institute, which builds that internal capacity and really helps with sustainability of practices. Somebody that's there every day to really guide and mentor, sort of internally coach the staff in a program. But I'm wondering if anyone has any questions about either the program practices they developed in Vermont, or perhaps how they got ongoing funding or any of the legislation that they got passed. Any questions for Holly before we move on? I see that Linda Bradford is typing. While we're waiting, I did want to ask you one question. Did you, Holly, have any, did you do any evaluation of what the leaders have said about the Institute? What impact they feel it had on their program?
Yeah, for those of you out there that support programs that do professional development, the feedback we got from the field was the strongest I have ever seen, having been in this field for a long time. People wrote quotes like, "This is the training, this is the professional development I have been waiting for my entire career. Like, this is what is allowing me to do the job. This is what I look forward to going to every month or every time." And if you go on our website, there is a short video under our SEL section, and I think it's just like 2 minutes or something, but it has staff members talking about the work and the changes it has made in their practice. So there's some really good testimonials from directors and site coordinators and staff in that as well.
And Holly, thanks. Yeah, Linda has a question about the facilitators of the COP. How are they identified, and are there specific topics they cover?
Yeah, so the first couple years, the facilitator was the social worker that we had on staff here in getting those communities practice started. And now with the expansion, we use mental health professionals to run those, so that you have the real deal in the room when things get tough and can handle, because also, you know, what we found is, right, like what I was saying about, you're talking about children, but you're also talking about staff and their own emotions and their own growth, and things come out in that very personal sharing, and you need to have someone there. They do go in with, into each session with some new information or a new tool, but then we also follow a real, for the second half, the second hour, a very strict protocol. It's 25 minutes long per person, 2 people share, and it has a strict protocol of they share for 5 minutes, and then you ask clarifying questions, and then it has a whole thing that they work through. So they have that routine, and it helps to direct and keep the space safe for that kind of sharing, and keep people from going too far off or making it about themselves instead of the issue that they're dealing with. And it gives staff a place to share in that environment. And we've had a mix of some of the communities of practice, the directors are there, and some of them it's just the site coordinators coming together. It kind of depends on the staff culture.
Holly, thanks so much. That sounds wonderful, really. Great model, and I love the evaluation feedback you got. That's so deeply impressive. Wonderful, probably for you to hear that people said, "I've been waiting for this all my life." Pretty exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, before we leave this section on building staff capacity on social emotional learning, I wanted to just share one concept and some resources that came up during our social emotional learning group. Dale Blythe, who's Extension Professor Emeritus at the University of Minnesota, suggests that staff can be more intentional in how social emotional competencies are taught, are both what he calls taught and caught. he explains that competencies can be taught through planned and sometimes evidence-based efforts to pass on knowledge, like the PASS curriculum that Holly mentioned. He also, though, highlights the potential in the many teachable moments that exist in daily relationships between staff and children, and between staff and how they really get that peer relationship circle going inside that room. And to tap the potential for these teachable moments really requires a lot of mentoring by program leaders and time for staff reflection. And these are big skills and take time to develop. So I think that this concept of taught and caught has really stuck in my mind as a really wonderful way for leaders to think about how critical is the idea of helping people bring their full selves into their after-school program, and how many opportunities exist every day in really advancing social-emotional competencies for children. I wanted to share this resource, Navigating SEL from the Inside Out. It takes a look at research-based and highly developed SEL programs that have proven to be effective in teaching SEL skills, and includes the instructional methods that can be effective. It takes a look at 25 different programs, and you have the PowerPoint here in the file share, and so if you want to be able to look up any of these resources, we have them all listed so that you can really make good use of these. In fact, NCASE has developed a resource library that includes dozens of resources on social emotional learning, and I helped to load up that library, and I just have to say it seems like every week something new and fabulous comes through our pipeline. So this is sort of one-stop shopping for you. You can go in and you could get enough resources from our library on SEL to really help you build any kind of training or technical assistance supports that you would want in your state. I want to review some of the top resources now that are in the library, just so that you know what's in there and what you can access. The first two here, and you might, small font, might have trouble reading these, but there are two resources listed from the Aspen report that Priscilla talked about. There's a great resource on strategies for after school, including how to really build youth voice and choice into program design. And as you know, strengthening youth voice and choice can lead to increased skills in leadership, autonomy, and responsibility, important social-emotional skills in their own right. There are also several articles in the library on how out-of-school time can support employability through college and career readiness. And there are two other really great resources that I love, and one of them is on kernels of practice. And this is a great resource for those programs that feel, as Vermont found, that it's hard to implement a full evidence-based curriculum in an after-school program because of the very nature of our short afternoons. But the kernels of practice are low-cost, low-burden activity ideas, but they're also research-based. So they're really, it's kind of a wonderful resource. And another resource from Oakland is what's called 3 signature practices on welcoming rituals, optimistic closures. So again, 2 very great hands-on resources for staff. Okay, we're going to go to discussion again. We want to take a few minutes here to hear about the strategies or resources that you're using in your state to build staff capacity on SEL and out-of-school time, or ways that you're supporting practices or policies on implementation. So Preet is going to bring up for us the chat pods, and I'm going to encourage people to just enter your ideas possibly your resources in. If you have links to things, you could put the link right into the chat pot. That would be great. But we'll give you a couple of minutes to enter your own ideas. It could be that you're offering training on trauma-informed practice. Could be that you're providing a lot of training for your coaching staff on reducing suspension and expulsion, or on how to access mental health services. It could be that you have a policy that's incorporating a required training on social emotional learning or trauma-informed practice into your QRIS. So I'm just giving you some ideas to kick things off. Thanks, Misty. Talking about training on trauma-informed care, QPR, and emotional first aid for staff. Misty, I'm going to ask, is that the same as mental health first aid, or is emotional first aid a different kind of training? Could you just type a little bit more about that? Because I'm familiar with mental health first aid training. Oh, and Oklahoma has a training bundle. That sounds wonderful. And Jana, maybe if you could say how many hours that is, people might find that interesting. Restorative practices training for all staff and faculty. Now, Erin, does that mean that all after-school staff can access that restorative practices training? Okay, Misty is saying it is mental health first aid. No, that's fine. That's good. Mental health first aid training, so people can know about it. It is an 8-hour training typically. It's often offered by schools, easy for us to access. It's often free. And I know that staff that have taken it just feel that it really gives them a good core understanding of how to spot mental health issues for children and how to know how to respond. So it's just a very good overview that's helpful for all staff. And someone's asking here for Oklahoma to talk a little bit more about their training bundle. I was interested too. That's great. Thanks for asking that, Brianne. And of course, mandated reporter training, which is required. Steve's talking about revising training plans for all levels of staff. So Jana's saying that the Oklahoma training is 40 hours. typing some more. Stipends for completion of the training bundle. That's wonderful. Thanks for all these great ideas. And I'm going to give you just one more minute to enter any final ideas or thoughts. I want you to notice that Clint put up Preparing Youth to Thrive, a link to that. Okay, I think, Preeti, thanks. We're ready to go back to our presentation. We're going to shift now to talk about mental health needs of children. The American Institutes for Research wrote an article about the mental health needs of children, and the brief identifies the most prevalent mental health issues for children, and they have the list in the order of prevalence. So what are the most prevalent mental health issues for children? ADHD, depression and anxiety, behavior or conduct disorder, substance use, autism spectrum, and Tourette's syndrome. Their research shows that 20% of children experience a mental, emotional, or behavioral disorder annually, and yet half of those children receive no mental health services, mostly due to barriers to access. As I mentioned before, for after-school programs, schools often become the de facto mental health system. On a positive note here, the Alliance for Inclusion and Prevention feels it's helpful to deliver the services where children are, which is in the schools. So given that many of us actually live in the school buildings or have partnerships and relationships with the school, it can really help us to have some access to some strong mental health supports. I think it's important that as state system planners, we really help to find ways to build these partnerships to access mental health supports we need. Given that 20% experience symptoms annually, and yet only half of those receive mental health services, we really need to ramp up our efforts. And a very logical place to start is to find out what's happening in the schools in your state. Similar to the levels of social emotional learning, mental health supports include tiers of services. This first tier at the bottom in purple are what are considered universal supports. These are supports that all students need, whether or not they have mental health challenges. So this would certainly include social emotional curriculum. The next tier are targeted supports for those at risk of developing a mental health challenge. And this group of children could use some intervention. And the top tier are intensive supports for a relatively small group of children that need more intensive interventions. So what kind of examples of universal targeted and intensive can we consider? At the universal level, a strategy that's drawing a lot of interest is mindfulness. About 30 years ago, John Kabat-Zinn built an organization known as Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction to support people with chronic pain and other health problems. He defines mindfulness as awareness that emerges when paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally, done by sitting quietly and focusing on the breath. He has come up with a lot of research that shows that mindfulness can strengthen emotional regulation, increase the ability to focus, reduce stress and anxiety, and not just for youth, but for the teachers that are helping children practice mindfulness. At the second level, the targeted level, is mental health first aid, which we've already talked about. It's this 8-hour training that's available for after-school staff or school personnel to really prepare adults to understand and support those at risk of developing mental health challenges. And these include more than were on that list on our previous slide. It includes psychosis, it includes eating disorders, it includes substance abuse. And so for those of you who are in states or regions that are really struggling with the opioid epidemic, this can be an important foundational training to offer. But let's take a look at a more intensive service, therapeutic after-school programs. Therapeutic after-school programs are an innovative service for those who are working with kids age 5 to 17. It's a very high level of service for those children who need more than outpatient therapy. And the beauty of it is you can maintain children in their homes, their schools, their communities with the goal of reducing mental health systems. So these programs are usually staffed by master's level clinicians. They usually also include a family engagement specialist, include access to psychiatrists for evaluations, for medication management. Program activities often include individual and group therapy, opportunities for empowerment and leadership, therapeutic recreation activities like art, music, and movement. And I know that when I was running programs, I sent 3 different children to therapeutic after-school program. It came back into our program after 3 months, and really just a wonderful, wonderful difference. Much more able to self-manage and to be able to create better relationships with their peers. We had a wonderful success with it. So I want to make sure people check out this possible opportunity in their region, in their state. We're about to hear from Oklahoma, and I want to just take a moment to define mental health consultation, because you're going to be hearing about it from Linda. Mental health consultation is a prevention-based service provided usually by a master's level mental health professional that builds the capacity of families and early childhood professionals to support social and emotional development. They provide consultation on individual children that might include child observations, might include a consultation with the family or with the staff, modeling, coaching with the child or with the staff, and advocacy for the family. So with that said, I'm pleased to introduce Linda Bradford, who's going to share promising practices from Oklahoma on their warm lines, their mental health consultation, and their mental health partnership in one school district. Linda Bradford is a QRS Assistant Manager for Oklahoma's Child Care Services, which is housed at the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. She's been doing this work for 36 years. It has been great to work over the last year with Linda. She's a team leader for the Oklahoma Peer Learning Group team, and so she's also going to share out some great practices that they've been working on through their action plan in Oklahoma. Very ambitious work. So with that, I introduce to you Linda Bradford. Linda, if you might be talking on mute. Try pressing *6. Okay, I think we're having some sound difficulties here. I want to give Linda just a minute to try to unmute her phone. Okay, Linda, you might want to try dialing back in. And perhaps while you're doing that, I'm just going to go over a few more of our resources, and then we'll pop back into you. But I would encourage you to dial back in so that we can hear you. Okay, so we have some additional resources that we wanted to share out with you. And the first one is a crosswalk of early childhood mental health services that comes from the Center of Excellence. Yes, hello? We can. Okay. Yes, thanks. And why don't you take a minute and catch your breath, and I'll just finish these resources and we'll pop right back to you, okay?
Okay, yes.
There's another article on a multi-tiered approach to mental health, and then one on mental health needs of children and youth. Excellent one on moving beyond awareness of stigma to public understanding of mental health issues. And I want to point out this one from Vanderploeg, which is my personal favorite on this. This is the one that explains therapeutic after-school programs. And then there's also SAMHSA's website, which it has just wonderful, wonderful links. So that said, Linda, I'm going to back up to your slides.
Okay, now, are you able to hear me now? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, as Susan said, I'm with the QRIS in Oklahoma, and our out-of-school time programs have been included in our QRIS from the beginning, and we were launched in 1998. And so I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about the social emotional supports Oklahoma currently has in place for our child care programs, including out of school time, and supports we're currently developing as well. And let's see, the first 3 slides I have describe initiatives Oklahoma already had in place to support positive social emotional climates in out of school time programs when we applied to participate in the NCASE-sponsored peer learning group that began in November of 2018. So the first one I'd like to talk about is our Child Care Warm Line, and it's provided by the collaborative work of 2 state agencies, the Department of Human Services, Child Care Services, and the Oklahoma State Department of Health, Child Guidance Services. And the Warm Line is a free service that's available to all child care programs and families, and it offers phone consultations around child health, behavior, and development. They help to clarify issues, generate ideas and solutions, offer guidance on developmentally appropriate practices, provide resources and outside referrals, and they also provide follow-up when needed. The second slide describes Oklahoma's Child Care Mental Health Consultation Initiative, which is provided by a partnership between Department of Human Services, Child Care Services, the Oklahoma State Department of Health, Child Guidance Services, and the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Mental health consultation is available to all licensed child care programs, including out of school time. Mental health consultation is provided statewide by Oklahoma State Department of Health, child guidance staff, and other qualified behavioral health and early childhood professionals. And Warm Line staff that we just discussed on the previous slide make the referrals for this on-site consultation. Initially, 16 hours of consultation is granted, which can be extended when needed. And the areas that child care consultation generally focuses on include minimizing suspension and expulsion, supporting positive social emotional development,
expanding staff's understanding of challenging behavior, connecting staff and families to resources, and family consultation and parent meetings. This third slide is an example of a partnership between one Oklahoma Metro School District and their out-of-school time program, with 14 out-of-school sites and 13 elementary and 1 middle school. This partnership has developed over many years by intentionally cultivating relationships. The school counselors and out-of-school time staff work together to meet the needs of specific children or groups of children, including group interactions, bullying, and referrals for additional services. Behavior check staff and paraprofessionals work one-on-one with specific children throughout the school day and touch base with the same children in their after-school and summer programs. And the schools and out-of-school time programs also have a partnership for on-site licensed counseling services when needed. This final slide covers some of the work Oklahoma has done during and related to our participation in the NK-sponsored out-of-school time social emotional learning peer learning group. The peer learning group opportunity came at a good time for our state. In early 2018, we had formed an out-of-school time task force composed of many out-of-school time advocates from throughout the state, such as administrators working directly with a wide range of out-of-school time programs, as well as our resource and referral, QRIS, and staff from our Center for Early Childhood Professional Development, which I'm going to talk about more about, refer to our Center for Early Childhood Professional Development more, and I'm just going to call them CECPD from now on. So the CECPD staff who was part of our peer learning group helps, well, she writes a lot of the curriculum, and she trains educators who provide professional development statewide. So she was a very helpful member of our group. The task force worked together to identify the components of high-quality out-of-school time programs and to make recommendations for future QRIS criteria. So when the peer learning group came along, we were primed and ready to jump in. The action steps we developed as a result of the peer learning group process were related to our chosen goal that Oklahoma's out-of-school time staff are knowledgeable about ACEs and PACEs. So ACEs is adverse childhood experiences, and PACEs is protective and compensatory experiences. One of our main action steps was that high-quality professional development will be available statewide to meet our chosen goals. Several courses are now either in the pilot phase or in the design process. These courses will be made available statewide by the educators qualified through our CECPD. And also as part of our peer learning group involvement, we developed a professional development evaluation tool that is now in use that was developed by a team of state out-of-school time experts and advocates to ensure that courses include social emotional content that supports our goals and outcomes. And another project that we worked on is we're developing a hub for social emotional resources to be available across the state. The hub is housed on CECPD's website, and this website is already regularly used by Oklahoma out-of-school time and really all early childhood personnel staff because it houses Oklahoma's professional development registry, our statewide training calendar, and a lot of other pertinent resources and projects supporting the child care industry. So we're currently in the process of gathering the social emotional resources, and members of our peer learning group will evaluate the content and approve for posting. And once we have the resources available, we plan to advertise on our partnering agency and group websites and Facebook pages, as well as a listserv that can reach all of the licensed child care programs in our state. The last peer learning group action step I'll share about is the resiliency video called Resilience, the Biology of Stress and the Science of Hope. This is a powerful documentary by KKJR Films that includes cutting-edge science about toxic stress, adverse childhood experiences, and field-tested protective strategies. The Potts Family Foundation has led an effort to expand awareness of ACEs and PACEs across Oklahoma, showing the film, and facilitating group discussion. One of our peer learning group's action steps is to intentionally develop and carry out a plan to offer this valuable training opportunity statewide to the out-of-school time and really all child care providers. And we're in the beginning stages of implementing this plan. And the last item I wanted to mention is that our state QRIS is currently actively in the process of updating and expanding our system. Our work with this NK-sponsored peer learning group, along with input from our out-of-school time QRIS task force and other stakeholder groups, has helped us to focus our research into how we can incorporate social emotional learning into our quality criteria as we move forward. So that's what I have to say.
Linda, that's wonderful. So many things that you're tackling in Oklahoma. It's just wonderful. And again, I want to give people a chance to ask a question in the chat. I know for me, just sort of curious about how it is you're doing this resiliency video. Are these cross-sector groups, is it happening in locations where it includes a range of people, or is it targeting specific after-school or early childhood audiences?
Well, the work that the Potts Family Foundation has been doing up to this time is to bring it to communities and large venues, and they show the film, and then they have a panel of experts that the participants can ask questions of. And so we are also, we've started the beginning of meeting with the Potts Family Foundation folks, and they're very excited to work with us on getting this. We would like to get it available in all throughout our state and get it on our CECPD training so that providers can go and get,
And get credit.
Professional development credit, yeah. So we thought this would be a really good way to get people to know about the importance of social emotional curriculum and getting it into their program.
Right. I know that several states that were in the peer learning group are using that resiliency video. We just never really plumbed into it to say who all's coming to that, who's in that audience, and is it a chance for some good cross-sector or cross-setting kind of conversation. So that's just wonderful. And I also think that your work with the Potts Foundation is inspirational, and encourage other states to take a look at what foundations might have an interest in supporting social emotional learning efforts. So thank you so much, Linda. That was wonderful. Such a lot of important work. And we're so glad that School Age is fully integrated into that work. Thank you. Okay, we're coming to the end of the webinar, and we wanted to just hear back from you a little bit about what you learned from today's session, what next steps you might take as a result of listening in, and what questions you still have. This is going to be really helpful for us to get an idea of what matters to you. So I'm going to encourage people to type right into those 3 chat pods here. Under what you learned, it could be something you relearned, or a prompt about something you knew about but haven't thought about in a while. So for many of you, it seems like this confirmed that you're, as Katie puts it, you're on the right track. Oh, and Erin, music to my ears that you're going to use the links that were provided. We love it when people take the resources and put them to use at home. Anybody have any questions that they still need to have answered? Okay, another minute to finish typing your thoughts in. I like Audrey's comment. She wants to provide more targeted SEL services for some youth who are experiencing trauma at home and unfortunately at their school. I think that's important, and I know a lot of schools are starting to incorporate trauma-informed practice. So again, looking at ways that we can be in trainings together helps us to develop a consistent approach across those settings. And let's get these last thoughts in and we'll be ready to wrap up. Yeah, more restorative practice instead of punitive. I think, Audrey, that's capturing the general movement here, is that we're really trying to move away from the concept of discipline and punishment and move really into the fact that it's about learning. It's about social emotional learning. And when we are teaching something, it requires repetition. And, you know, we don't punish somebody just because they didn't learn that history fact. We try to teach it another way. So I think this is a big shift in many cultures and I think much needed. So appreciate that. And Preeti, I think we're ready to go back to wrap up here. As we close out today, I just want to share out some upcoming events that the National Center on Afterschool and Summer Enrichment is involved in. The first is an Infant, Toddler, and School Age Institute, which is virtual. Last year it was in person, but this year you can join by webinar. The link for joining these sessions is right here. And the first one is next week, next Wednesday. It's on family child care and how to support providers who are working with mixed age groups. People may not be aware of it, but about a fourth of children who are served by Child Care Development Fund subsidy are served in family child care settings. And so thinking about how they are fully supported to have a positive social emotional climate, engaging activities is important part of planning for supporting all of our kids. Then on December 11th, there's going to be one on building quality improvement systems, including systems that are responsive particularly for infants and toddlers and for school age. And the third in the series is January 8th. It's on trauma and resilience. So we have a pretty nice package of webinars coming up. Also, want you to watch for an announcement about NCASE's new community of practice on building quality improvement. There will be 4 sessions, January through April. We're looking to send out the announcement fairly soon. And this will be an informal, true community of practice setting where state teams will have a chance really to talk informally with each other about how to design quality systems that really reflect some of the unique challenges that face school age. And with that, I want to thank you for your great participation, and thanks again so much to Priscilla, Holly, and Linda for sharing so many promising practices. Really appreciate your contributions. Have a good weekend and look forward to seeing you virtually in the months ahead. Bye-bye.